On today's video, I'm going to share my custom Framemeister profiles for the Sega Genesis version of the HD Retrovision Component Cables. While the original intent of the HD Retrovision Component Cables was to allow a superior retro gaming experience on a modern flat panel television, I thought it would be interesting to test it using the Framemeister. There could be reasons you might have an HD Retrovision Component Cable rather than a more traditional RGB SCART cable as well, such as purchasing the Framemeister after the HD Retrovision cable whet your appetite for RGB video, and of course, component video switches are still relatively cheap and more accessible than SCART video switches, at least here in the US. Of course, the Framemeister does not have a component video input, so you'll need a D-terminal to component adapter cable. You'll also want to turn the brightness switch down on the HD Retrovision cable itself. Before we get started, let me get a few things out of the way. First, as of this video, the most recent version of the Framemeister firmware is 2.03a, so I am going to assume you are using this firmware. Next, you should reset all of your settings by going to Data, Reset from the Framemeister menu. This should reset everything to their default values, but won't change any of your previously saved profiles. Next, I'm going to offer two different profiles, beginning with a 1080p profile and then a 720p profile. Now, I do have some personal preferences, including a 1:1 pixel ratio over a 4:3 aspect ratio. I also prefer a perfect 5x scale, sacrificing a bit of vertical resolution in exchange for sharpness. So, with that, here are the settings that I use. Next, let's move on to my 720p profile. This may be useful if your television only supports 720p resolutions. If you're like me and can only capture 60 frames per second video at 720p, and finally, 720p is preferable if you're a scanline aficionado. Again, these settings will give you a perfect 1:1 pixel ratio instead of a 4:3 aspect ratio. These settings also offer a perfect 3x scale for maximum sharpness. However, there will be a black border along the top and bottom of the screen. Again, compromise. So with that, here are the 720p settings that I use. One of the Framemeister's strong points are its handling of 240p content, even over component, and these settings should give you a near emulation experience on the big screen.